You've probably seen the headlines Robert F. Kennedy Jr. calling for a nationwide ban on dozens of ingredients still sitting quietly in American kitchens. It sounded political, even extreme. But here's the unsettling part: it isn't about Washington at all. It's about your pantry, your breakfast, your family's table. Because many of the foods he named are already banned or restricted in places like Europe, Canada, and Japan, not for trend, but for safety. From the bright reds in children's cereal to the sodas once made with flame-retardant chemicals, to the pork treated with drugs that never pass foreign borders. These aren't distant policy debates. They're sitting on your shelf right now. Tonight, we're breaking down 9 everyday foods still allowed in the US that other nations said no to, and why. Stay until the end, because what you'll hear might quietly change the way you shop on your next mall trip, and maybe the way you trust what's safe. Number 1. Red dye 3. You've seen it 1,000 times in jelly beans, cherry sodas, and frosted cupcakes that glow brighter than memory itself. That color known as red dye 3 was never meant to be a mystery. It was meant to sell joy. Yet for more than 70 years, this petroleum-based pigment has occupied a strange space in American law, forbidden in cosmetics, but permitted in food. In 1990, the Food and Drug Administration removed red 3 from lipsticks and blushes after studies showed thyroid tumor development in laboratory rats. Still, the same chemical continued to tint our snacks, cereals, and seasonal candies. This paradox finally began to shift when California passed its Food Safety Act set to take effect in 2027, banning red 3, along with several other long-contested additives. It is a small step, but it signals something larger: that American labeling standards are slowly catching up to what many countries decided years ago. Across the Atlantic, the European Union restricted synthetic dyes, such as red 3, long ago, requiring clear warning labels on products that could affect children's attention or behavior. The science was never absolute, but the risk was plausible. Europe acted on precaution. The United States waited for proof. That waiting game shaped an entire generation of marketing: bright reds, neon yellows, glowing blues, all engineered to amplify appetite. The result was not catastrophe, but complacency. Companies kept selling color, and regulators kept reviewing the same data for decades. Today, it is less about one dye and more about the process that let it stay. The slow crawl of reform raises an uncomfortable question: how many safe until proven otherwise ingredients are still passing through the same loopholes? Because the truth is, color was never the problem. The real issue lies in the comfort of delay, the quiet belief that if it remains on the shelf, it must be fine. Pause on that thought the next time you see a candy aisle glowing like a carnival. It is not dangerous in a wrapper, it is policy painted red. And while colors are finally being re-examined, one ingredient quietly outlasted them all: a clear oil that once stabilized soda, protected its flavor, and slipped through regulation for half a century. Let us talk about BVO, brominated vegetable oil. Number 2. Brominated vegetable oil. In 2024, the Food and Drug Administration finally drew the line. After nearly a century of hesitation, it banned brominated vegetable oil, closing one of the longest chapters in American food regulation. The ruling followed repeated state petitions, global precedents, and scientific papers warning that the additive behaved less like food and more like residue. BVO was first approved in the 1930s. Its job was simple: to keep orange and lemon flavor evenly mixed in soft drinks. A teaspoon of chemistry for a lifetime of stability. The problem was hidden in its name. Bromine, the same reactive element once used in flame retardants, became an uninvited guest in the human diet. Under bright supermarket lights, a bottle of soda looks perfect. The bubbles rise in rhythm, the color glows without streaks. No cloudiness, no oil ring, no reason to suspect anything. That optical harmony was exactly what BVO sold: consistency disguised as purity. But consistency came with a cost. By the early 2000s, researchers began finding measurable bromine in the blood and fat of heavy soda drinkers. In lab animals, accumulation led to thyroid, liver, and neurological disturbances. The European Union, Japan, and India had already banned the compound decades earlier. The United States waited, testing, reviewing, postponing, until the data finally left no room for interpretation. When the decision came, it arrived quietly. No panic, no protest. Just a slow acknowledgement that some conveniences age faster than their oversight. And yet the story is not about a single chemical. It is about a pattern that repeats, a policy rhythm where the burden of proof always falls on the public, not the producer. BVO was never a villain. It was a habit, a useful tool that outlived its reason to exist. And if it took nearly 90 years to remove one additive that made soda shimmer, imagine how many more are still shimmering unchecked. Because if oil could make a drink look perfect, Science soon found a way to make bread rise higher, even if it meant baking trust with a chemical called potassium bromate. Number 3. Potassium bromate. The smell of fresh bread has always been America's comfort. Warm, soft, steady. That golden crust feels timeless, a symbol of home itself. But inside that rise sits a quiet equation, one that traded patience for precision. A chemical called potassium bromate changed how bread behaved and how we stopped noticing. In the race for uniformity, commercial bakeries discovered that this compound could strengthen gluten, make dough more elastic, and guarantee volume even under industrial heat. Every loaf looked the same, browned the same, and lasted longer. What began as a technical marvel slowly turned into a silent dependence, an invisible contract between chemistry and profit. It worked so well that few questioned it. The numbers made sense. The risks were easy to shelve. For decades, the assumption was simple bromate burned off in the oven. But studies later found that under high-speed production, when loaves moved from mixing to packaging in under an hour, some of it survived the heat. Trace amounts remained in the finished bread undetectable by sight or smell. That discovery changed everything. Researchers began seeing signs of oxidative stress and DNA damage in animal tests, suggesting that bromate could interfere with how cells repair themselves. The International Agency for Research on Cancer labeled it a Group 2B carcinogen, meaning possibly cancer-causing to humans. It is not a guaranteed danger, but a credible one. And for something added purely for convenience, credible risk was more than enough reason to act. Other nations agreed. The European Union, Canada, and China banned potassium bromate decades ago. Their bakeries moved on adopting ascorbic acid, better known as vitamin C, to do the same job without the baggage. California will follow by 2027 through its new Food Safety Act. Walk into a factory bakery today, and you can still hear the hum of the conveyor belts, see the steam rise in perfect rhythm. Loaves swell in shining steel molds, identical, flawless. The sight is mesmerizing until you realize it's chemistry doing the rising, not yeast, not time. This is the paradox of progress. We built efficiency so perfect that even risk became routine. Safer methods exist. They just take more time, and industrial economics is the one ingredient most easily cut. I've baked for 40 years, says a retired baker from Wisconsin. Real dough rises slower, but it feels alive. You can smell when it's ready. That isn't nostalgia. That's chemistry the way it was meant to be, alive, imperfect human. Number 4. Titanium dioxide. What if the color white, the one we trust most, was the least natural of all? That perfect gleam on frosting and candy shells didn't come from sugar, nor cream, nor milk. It came from a mineral ground so fine it can slip between cells. Titanium dioxide, listed on labels as E171, gave food its bright, camera-ready glow for more than half a century. It began as an innocent innovation. In the 1960s, candy makers needed coatings that would not fade under light. Titanium dioxide, already used in toothpaste and sunscreen, offered a simple fix. It scattered light evenly, making every sweet look cleaner, whiter, and more premium. For decades, regulators called it inert, a color, not a chemical. But that confidence dimmed as science caught up. With stronger microscopes came smaller revelations. What looked like dust turned out to be particles so fine, nanoparticles smaller than bacteria, that they could cross biological barriers. Some studies linked those fragments to oxidative stress and DNA damage in animal cells. It was not proof of harm, but it was reason for pause. In 2021, the European Food Safety Authority declared titanium dioxide can no longer be considered safe as a food additive. The European Union banned it the following year. In the United States, it remains on the market, still listed as generally recognized as safe, though under renewed FDA review. The science moved quickly. Policy, as usual, lagged behind. Walk into a bakery, and you can see the illusion it built. A cake so white it reflects light like porcelain. Frosting that glows brighter than the room around it. For generations, we believed that brightness meant purity, that a shine on the surface meant honesty inside. A chocolatier in Oregon said it best. When I stopped using it, customers said my truffles looked duller until they tasted one. Maybe purity was never color. Maybe it was care. Number 5. Propyl paraben. We found parabens where they didn't belong, in the bloodstream and tissues, and yes, in the diet, said Dr. Karuntachalam Kannan, environmental toxicologist at the New York State Department of Health. For decades, propyl paraben was treated as a quiet hero. The unseen reason your favorite pastries stayed soft, your syrups didn't spoil, and your granola bars tasted the same after months on the shelf. Introduced in the 1940s, it became the industry's way of saying, don't worry, time won't touch this. It belongs to the paraben family compounds designed to stop bacteria and mold. In theory, that sounds like progress. But in practice, these same chemicals can imitate the body's natural estrogen. The Endocrine Society classifies propyl paraben as a potential hormone disruptor. The European Food Safety Authority banned it in 2015 after animal studies showed altered sperm counts and developmental changes in reproductive organs. It didn't take scandal or panic, just data and precaution. In the United States, though, it's still quietly legal, still listed as generally recognized as safe, still part of everyday foods from flavored syrups to baked snacks. Regulators argue that exposure levels are too low to matter, but scientists disagree on one point: no one measures the total. Parabens in your lotion, in your deodorant, in your breakfast bar. Alone, each seems harmless. Together, they build a silent continuity, a chemical chorus the body never signed up for. That's the real issue. Propyl paraben doesn't just preserve food. It preserves our illusion that freshness can be frozen in time. It's what allows a cupcake to stay soft for 6 weeks, a muffin to glow under plastic, a syrup to wait on the shelf for half a year and still pour like new. When food stops aging, we stop noticing. I remember when that trade-off began to feel normal. My grandmother used to tell by smell whether bread was still good. She'd pinch it, breathe it in, nod quietly. No expiration date, just instinct. By the time I started buying groceries for my own family, I no longer trusted my nose, I trusted the label. If it said best by, I believed it. If it didn't mold, I assumed it was safe. Maybe that's how progress works, not through choice, but through quiet adaptation. The world changes and we follow without realizing. We began to fear food that aged, that spoiled, that looked real. We learned to seek permanence instead. Propyl paraben did its job perfectly, it stopped life from showing. But maybe that's the problem. We learned to fear expiration dates, not what never expired. Number 6, high fructose corn syrup. It began as a solution, not a sin. In the 1970s, when global sugar prices soared and trade barriers tightened, American food companies faced a crisis. Sweetness had become too costly to sustain. Out of that scarcity came invention, a way to turn surplus corn into liquid sugar. High fructose corn syrup was born, a syrup so cheap and so flexible that it would quietly rewrite not only what America ate, but what it felt. At first it seemed harmless, even smart. But sweetness has never been just chemistry. It is memory, comfort, childhood. And this one changed the rules. High fructose corn syrup did not fade like cane sugar. It lingered. It made sweetness endless, mechanical, repeatable, predictable. Meals became quicker portions, larger emotions, flatter. The taste of pleasure stopped ending when fullness began. By the 1980s, nearly every major soda brand had switched. Corn syrup flowed through the supply chain like a golden artery, cheaper than sugar, sweeter on the tongue, and more stable in storage. It was progress on paper, profit in liquid form. But behind that efficiency was a quiet cost: the loss of natural rhythm between craving and calm. The United States Department of Agriculture estimates that the average American now consumes over 40 pounds of high fructose corn syrup every year. Studies from the National Institutes of Health and Harvard School of Public Health connect long-term consumption with insulin resistance, metabolic stress, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Yet beyond the lab data lies something softer: the emotional fatigue of a society always reaching for sweetness, rarely finding satisfaction. Walk down any supermarket aisle and it's everywhere in sauces, bread, cereal, yogurt. Sweetness woven into everything, invisible and constant. The syrup solved a problem of cost, but it created a hunger of its own. Decades later, the flavor remains, but the meaning has changed. What once felt like celebration now feels like routine. Sugar used to end a meal. Now it fills the silence between them. And as America's plates grew sweeter, something else began to shift: the way we flavored emotion itself. Because when sweetness becomes a habit, bitterness never stands a chance. Number 7, processed deli meats. A woman lingers at the supermarket deli, eyes fixed on rows of pink slices stacked under the glass. She asks quietly, "How fresh are these?" The clerk smiles and nods, sliding paper across the scale. She nods too, though something in her eyes says she's not sure what fresh means anymore. According to the World Health Organization, processed meat is a Group 1 carcinogen classified in the same tier as tobacco smoke. Research published in The Lancet and Cancer Epidemiology confirms consistent links between deli meats and colorectal cancer, as well as elevated risks of cardiovascular disease. When heated, sodium nitrite, the compound that keeps ham blushing and salami spotless, can transform into nitrosamines, which directly damage DNA. Europe restricts these preservatives to minimal use. The United States, however, still permits them in regulated doses. Processed deli meats were once a triumph of preservation. Before refrigeration, smoke and salt were a form of protection, a way to extend life through craft. But industrialization rewrote that craft into chemistry. Nitrites locked the color, delayed spoilage, and erased time itself from the product. Every slice became identical polished pink, immune to decay. The danger is no longer in the obvious, it's in the illusion. These meats look eternal because they were engineered to deny age. Consumers see color, not chemistry. They taste familiarity, not preservation. And as the habit deepens, the line between safety and simulation fades away. Inside the body, the story continues quietly. Nitrites react with amino acids during digestion, generating compounds that inflame and erode tissue. The process is slow, cumulative, and invisible, the kind of harm that hides behind routine. Dr. Dariush Mozaffarian-Dean at the Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy at Tufts University explains nitrite-treated meats do more than preserve freshness. They alter the oxidative environment of digestion itself, setting the stage for chronic inflammation. He adds that the risk doesn't come from one sandwich, but from decades of believing pink means pure. The woman at the counter leaves with her package wrapped in clean paper. The surface glows the same soft pink as always. She smiles politely, unaware she's holding a fragment of time that forgot how to end. We built a food system terrified of aging, and it shows in every perfect slice. Number 8. Ultra-processed foods. Maybe this was the price of progress. For decades, America believed that innovation could feed everyone, that hunger could be engineered away, and comfort could fit inside a box. The freezer aisle wasn't just born from business, it was born from faith in efficiency, a national conviction that speed equaled care. The National Institutes of Health classifies ultra-processed foods as those with 5 or more industrial ingredients, and they now make up over half of what Americans eat. Yet across the ocean, others made different choices. France protected its school kitchens, Brazil wrote public dietary guidelines centered on whole foods, Japan kept its rice bowls unaltered by additives. The world began treating processed food as a symptom to manage. The United States, meanwhile, treated it as a success to celebrate. That divergence began in the 1970s when federal subsidies encouraged mass corn, wheat, and soy production. Frozen meals, snack cakes, and boxed dinners flourished not just as food, but as symbols of prosperity. A full freezer meant stability, even pride. Politicians pointed to affordable abundance as proof that the American dream could be microwaved in minutes. By the 1980s, convenience had become cultural diplomacy. Cargo ships carried frozen pizzas and instant noodles from American ports to global shelves. U.S. advertising agencies exported a new language of comfort, glossy images of family dinners, fast smiles, and effortless joy. Food became marketing, and marketing became policy. Other countries regulated, America democratized. The logic was simple: why question what works? Why trade a hot meal for a hard truth? Both political parties embraced the same philosophy: let the market feed the people. Efficiency became bipartisan, framed as freedom. Few noticed how that freedom slowly narrowed how home cooking, once a ritual of family, turned into a luxury of time. The freezer aisle became more than a section of the store. It became a monument to a national ideal. Rows of identical boxes glowing behind glass, humming with cold certainty. Each one a small victory of progress and a quiet confession of dependence. Maybe that's what the world sees when it looks at us, a country that froze its warmth in the name of convenience. If warmth can be frozen, maybe convenience was never the comfort we thought it was. Number 9. Diet soda. Once a drink was more than thirst. In the 1950s, soda meant youth, a kind of sweet rebellion shared through glass bottles and chrome counters. Families celebrated small victories with it: a new job, a baseball win, a Sunday drive. It fizzed with innocence. The bubbles carried laughter, not slogans. But time has a way of rewriting even the simplest rituals. When the culture began fearing sugar more than scarcity, sweetness didn't disappear, it adapted. And what replaced it wasn't flavor, it was formula. The World Health Organization recently listed aspartame as a possible carcinogen. Studies from Yale and Harvard show that artificial sweeteners like aspartame and sucralose can disrupt gut bacteria, confuse insulin signaling, and raise long-term risks of obesity and metabolic disease. Yet the Food and Drug Administration continues to call them safe within limits. That phrase, "within limits," feels like a quiet summary of the entire era. When Diet Coke debuted in 1982, it was more than a product. It was a mood. America was chasing modernity, leaner, faster, cleaner, and the can matched that energy perfectly. Silver, minimal, efficient. It didn't just sell fewer calories, it sold control. Diet soda was not designed for the hungry, but for the hopeful. The message was elegant. You can keep everything taste pleasure freedom if you just trade sugar for chemistry. Across oceans, the story sounded different. Italy kept its espresso culture. Japan still paused for tea. France preserved its cafe rituals where conversation mattered as much as caffeine. But America turned drinking into multitasking. The fizz became background noise to emails, traffic, deadlines. Soda was no longer a break. It was a bridge between one obligation and the next. And the word diet, once a symbol of discipline, turned into something emotional. It meant belonging. Women on magazine covers held cans instead of purses. Athletes endorsed them as lifestyle. Politicians toasted with them at rallies. The drink carried no color, no calories, no guilt, just a hollow kind of purity that fit perfectly into a culture obsessed with improvement. But that purity came at a cost. Artificial sweetness lights up the brain's reward system without feeding it. The body expects energy that never arrives. Appetite lingers, confusion deepens, and yet another sip feels necessary. Nutritionists call it a metabolic illusion. Psychologists call it symbolic substitution. People just call it habit. Decade after decade, that habit became heritage. Children who once saw their parents pour sugar into coffee now pop cans labeled 0. The flavor no longer matters. The ritual does. Each crack of aluminum echoes the same national story, the pursuit of perfection, 1 calorie at a time. Perhaps that's why the can still sells? Not because it's delicious, but because it feels familiar. Because it fits the American promise, everything improved, everything lighter, everything still in your control. Maybe 0 didn't mean nothing, maybe it meant what we lost. Thank you for staying until the end. 9 foods, 9 lessons, and 1 truth that runs through them all. What we eat is no longer just nutrition, it's negotiation. We've seen how dyes promise beauty oils, promise health, dough promises softness, and soda promises control. Each of them born from good intention, each reshaped by profit and speed. But awareness isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. You don't have to throw everything away. You just have to start noticing. Read the labels that sound too perfect. Ask where your food was made and why. Choose patience over packaging once in a while. The smallest choice, a real tomato, a home-brewed coffee, a walk to the farmer's market, is an act of quiet rebellion in a world built on convenience. America's food system is vast, and change won't come overnight. But every time you buy something honest, you vote for a different kind of future one, where flavor means freshness, not formula. If you've watched this far, you're already part of that change. You've proven that curiosity still matters, that awareness still has weight. So tonight when you open your fridge or walk down an aisle, remember this: the purest ingredient has never been sugar, oil, or salt. It's choice, the one thing industry can't manufacture, and the one thing still completely yours. Stay aware, stay kind, and stay hungry, but for the right things.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.